Everyone ignored the veteran with Alzheimer until a black waitress held his hand. "He's a billionaire." Crystal chandeliers shimmered above the crowded dining room as violins whispered through the speakers. A man in his late 70s stood near the center of the restaurant, trembling, his eyes darting around in frightened confusion. His suit was expensive but wrinkled, his tie slightly askew, as if he had dressed himself without remembering how. Conversations hushed. A few guests turned their heads, whispering behind polished menus. One waiter laughed under his breath, calling him lost. No one moved to help. Amira Johnson noticed him while clearing a nearby table. Something in the way he clutched his hat, trembling as if the world had slipped away from him, froze her in place. Her co-workers looked the other way, pretending not to see. But Amira could not. She walked toward him, slow and calm, her hands gentle as she spoke softly, trying to anchor him in the moment. "It is all right, sir. You are safe here," she whispered, reaching for his hand. The restaurant fell silent. Silverware stopped clinking. All eyes followed the young black waitress who dared to touch the confused stranger. The kitchen door burst open. Eric Dalton, the manager, stormed in, his face red with irritation. "Amira, step away from that man right now," he barked. "He just needs a little help," she said quietly, refusing to let go. Eric's jaw tightened. "If you do not move your hand this second, you can consider yourself fired." Amira Patel was the kind of woman who carried two worlds on her shoulders, one of survival and one of quiet hope. Every morning she left her tiny one-bedroom apartment before the sun rose, careful not to wake her younger sister, Layla. The girl was only 12, all curly hair and soft dreams, still clinging to the idea that life could be beautiful someday. Amira wanted to believe that too, but rent was due every week and beauty didn't pay bills. She worked double shifts at La Veranda, one of the most expensive restaurants downtown. It was the kind of place where people whispered names like senator, doctor, or CEO as if they were royal titles. The staff was expected to be invisible, smile, serve, and disappear. Amira had mastered that. The smile, the quiet, the disappearing. But behind that composure was a woman who carried her mother's last words like a scar and a promise. "Always help people, even when it costs you, my love, because that's who we are." Her mother, Fatima, had passed away 3 years earlier, after a long battle with illness that drained everything. Savings, spirit, and time. Amira was only 20 then, juggling community college classes by day and dishwashing shifts by night. When the medical bills piled too high, she gave up her education to work full-time. Layla was still in school, still dreaming of being a nurse like Mama wanted. Amira made sure of that. She made sure Layla had clean clothes, warm meals, and textbooks, even if it meant Amira herself skipped dinner some nights. At La Veranda, Amira was known as the girl who never says no. The manager, Eric Lawson, liked that about her. At least, that's what he said when he wanted her to cover another shift or stay late for the high-paying guests. Eric was a man obsessed with appearances. His tie was always perfect, his voice clipped and rehearsed, and his temper sharp as the knives in the kitchen. He didn't see people, he saw performances. To him, Amira wasn't a person trying to survive. She was part of the show, a soft-spoken waitress who looked exotic enough to impress guests but knew her place. Sometimes, when a guest made a racist comment or snapped their fingers for service, Amira would swallow her pride, smile, and whisper to herself, "Not today. Don't let them take your peace." Her co-workers often mocked her kindness. "You let them walk all over you," one said. But Amira just smiled. Someone has to be decent around here. She didn't realize that being decent in a world like this could get you destroyed. That night, when the old veteran, Henry, stumbled into the restaurant, Amira was already exhausted. She'd worked 15 hours straight. Her feet throbbed, her back ached, and she'd barely eaten a sandwich since morning. Still, when she saw Henry, confused, trembling, muttering names under his breath, she didn't hesitate. While everyone else froze, Amira stepped forward. She helped him sit, poured him a glass of water, and spoke in a tone as gentle as her mother's once was. "It's okay, sir," she whispered, steadying his shaking hands. "You're safe. You're not alone." For a moment, the chaos quieted. Henry looked at her with wide, bewildered eyes that had seen war, loss, and pain too heavy to name. He mumbled something, half words, half memories. I didn't mean to leave them. They were just kids." Amira squeezed his hand. "It's all right. You did what you could." But before she could say more, Eric's voice sliced through the calm. "What on earth is going on here?" Every head turned. Eric stormed across the room, his face red with fury. "This is a fine dining establishment, not a shelter," he barked. "You can't just let random people sit here." Amira stood her ground, voice trembling but firm. "He's not random. He needs help." Eric sneered. "And you need to remember your place." The guests chuckled quietly, their laughter sharp as glass. A few even applauded when Eric announced, "You're done here, Amira. Pack your things." The room fell into an uneasy silence, except for the sound of Henry trying to stand. He looked at her, eyes filled with confusion and guilt, as if somehow he had caused her downfall. Amira didn't cry. Not there. Not in front of them. She simply took a deep breath, unclipped her name tag, and placed it on the counter. Then, without a word, she walked out. Outside, the city air hit her face, cold and sharp. Her hands trembled as she wiped away the tears that finally escaped. Through the restaurant's glass door, Henry still sat there, watching her with a sadness that seemed to reach across time itself. In that silent exchange, his broken eyes meeting her trembling ones, something unspoken passed between them. A promise, a bond neither of them understood yet. And as Amira turned away, the night swallowed her in quiet injustice. Her kindness punished, her dignity bruised, but her spirit still unbroken. The rain had started by the time Amira reached home. Thin, cold drops fell from a sky that looked as tired as she felt. She walked into her small apartment, kicked off her shoes, and let her bag fall onto the couch. Layla was already asleep, her math book still open beside her, a pencil resting across the page. Amira pulled a blanket over her sister's shoulders, then sat quietly in the dark for a while. The night felt heavy. Her phone buzzed with a text from a coworker. "He really fired you? Over that old man?" Amira didn't reply. She couldn't. Her chest still burned with the memory of all those eyes on her, laughing, clapping, treating her compassion like a crime. She rubbed her temples and leaned back. That's when she noticed something lying at the bottom of her bag. A small, worn leather wallet. Her breath caught. Henry's wallet. She must have picked it up when she helped him stand. Carefully, she opened it, expecting to find a few bills, maybe an old photo. Instead, what she saw made her freeze. A polished metal nameplate. Henry Caldwell, founder and CEO, Caldwell Systems. Her eyes widened. She flipped through the cards and documents inside, each one confirming it. The man she helped, the man everyone laughed at, was no ordinary stranger. Caldwell Systems. Everyone in the city knew that name. They were one of the biggest tech companies in the country, building software, robotics, even defense contracts. Henry Caldwell had been called the mind behind the machines years ago, but the man she'd met tonight was trembling, lost, barely able to remember where he was. Amira traced a finger over an old photo tucked behind the IDs. It showed a younger Henry in a military uniform, standing beside men in suits and medals, people who clearly held power. Yet even in that old picture, there was kindness in his smile. Her heart ached. The man who once built empires had been treated like trash in a restaurant that worshipped money and image. She turned the wallet over in her hands. There was a small card inside. Emergency contact information. Grace Caldwell, daughter. 555, 397, 1028. Amira hesitated. What if they thought she'd stolen it? What if they blamed her the way Eric had? She sat there for a long minute, staring at the number glowing on her phone screen. Then she heard her mother's voice in her mind again, soft and steady. Always help people even when it costs you. Her fingers trembled as she pressed call. The line rang once, twice. Then a voice answered, tight, frantic, full of emotion. "Hello? Who is this?" Amira took a breath. "Hi, my name is Amira. I think I found your father's wallet." "Henry Caldwell?" The woman on the other end gasped. "Oh my God, you found him? Is he okay? We've been looking for him for hours. He wandered off from his caregiver. He has memory lapses sometimes. Please, where are you?" Amira explained what had happened. How Henry had walked into the restaurant confused. How she'd tried to help him. For a moment, there was only silence. Then the woman's voice broke softly. "You stayed with him? You helped him when no one else did?" "Yes," Amira said quietly. "He seemed scared. I couldn't just ignore him." The woman exhaled shakily, relief flooding her tone. "You have no idea what this means. I'm Grace, his daughter. Please don't go anywhere. I'm coming to you right now." Amira hesitated. "You don't have to—" But Grace cut her off. "No, you did something nobody else would. You treated him like a human being. Please, just stay where you are." The call ended, leaving Amira sitting in stunned silence, the phone still warm in her hand. Outside, the rain softened to a drizzle. For the first time that day, Amira felt her heart lift. Just a little. Maybe kindness wasn't weakness after all. Maybe tonight it had finally been seen. And somewhere in that fragile quiet, she felt a strange new sense of hope. As if, just maybe, justice was on its way. The next morning, the luxury restaurant buzzed with weekend chatter. Laughter echoed against glass walls, waiters moved in perfect rhythm, and Eric Dalton stood near the bar, adjusting his tie with pride. He had already forgotten about Amira Johnson. At least, he thought he had. But outside, a line of black cars began pulling up. The restaurant's valet froze mid-step as uniformed security stepped out, followed by a woman in a sharp navy suit. Her stride was firm, her eyes fierce. It was Grace Caldwell. Within minutes, the restaurant's polished calm cracked. Cameras flashed through the glass as news vans rolled to a stop. The name Caldwell Systems on one of the security jackets made a few guests glance up, whispering. Eric's smile twitched. He straightened his jacket and stepped forward. "Good morning, ma'am." "Welcome to—" Grace cut him off, her voice like steel. "You're the manager who humiliated my father." Every sound in the restaurant vanished. Plates stopped clinking. Waiters froze mid-step. Eric blinked, forcing a polite laugh. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Your father? I'm not sure." Before he could finish, 2 security guards opened the door. Henry Caldwell stepped in slowly, one hand resting lightly on Grace's arm. He looked older than he had the night before, eyes distant but softer this time. When he spotted Amira, who had quietly entered behind them at Grace's request, something in his expression changed. His eyes brightened, and a faint smile tugged at his lips. "You helped me," he whispered, voice trembling. Amira nodded gently. "It's good to see you again, Mr. Caldwell." Gasps rippled through the restaurant. A woman near the corner table muttered, "Caldwell? As in—" Eric's color drained. "Mr. Caldwell? You mean—" Grace turned to face the gathering crowd. "Yes," she said clearly, her voice echoing. "This man, this veteran you all ignored, is Henry Caldwell, founder of Caldwell Systems, billionaire, philanthropist, a man who has given more to this country than any of you could imagine." The silence that followed was suffocating. Eric stumbled over his words, his slick confidence melting fast. "I had no idea. He was disrupting the guests. I was only maintaining—" Grace's glare stopped him cold. "You fired a woman for helping him. You mocked him in front of strangers, and you lied about it." Eric's hands trembled. "That is not true. She caused chaos. I was protecting the restaurant's reputation." Amira finally spoke. Her tone was calm but steady. "I did not cause chaos. I helped a man who was scared and alone. But I guess kindness does not fit well on your menu, does it?" A murmur of agreement spread through the staff. One of the waiters, nervous but determined, stepped forward. "Ms. Caldwell, I have something you should see." He pulled out his phone, hands shaking, and tapped play. On screen, the footage showed the entire incident. Eric yelling, guests laughing, Amira standing beside the trembling old man. Every insult, every cruel word was there. The crowd watched in stunned silence. Grace's jaw tightened. She turned to Eric, her tone quiet but cutting. "You called that professionalism?" Eric's voice cracked. "That video, it's taken out of context." She defied orders. She embarrassed this establishment. "Embarrassment," Grace said slowly, "is forgetting what humanity looks like." The words hit like a blade. Henry blinked as if trying to process everything. He reached out a shaky hand, and Amira stepped forward instinctively. Their hands met, just as they had the night before. For a brief second, the chaos faded. A camera flashed, capturing the moment. The billionaire with fading memories, and the waitress who refused to look away. Eric took a step back, realizing the story had already left the room. Reporters outside were talking fast, microphones raised. Words like billionaire, waitress, humiliation, and fired for kindness spilled into the air. Grace turned toward them. "You all should know who my father is. But more importantly," she said, glancing at Amira, "you should know who she is. The woman who showed him the respect this place could not." The guests sat frozen, shame painted across their faces. The same people who laughed the night before now bowed their heads. Eric's world began to collapse in real time. He could already see headlines forming, investors pulling away, calls from corporate demanding answers. His perfect image was cracking, fast, and through it all, Henry sat quietly, his hand still resting in Amira's. He looked at her with the kind of recognition that did not come from memory, but from something deeper. "The world forgets so quickly," he murmured softly, eyes glistening. Grace knelt beside him, tears threatening. "But you built that world, Dad." Henry gave a small, tired smile. "Then maybe it is time it remembered." And as flashes filled the room, one line lingered in every mind. The man they mocked for forgetting the world was the very man who built it. Cameras flashed like lightning, each click echoing through the once proud restaurant that now felt like a courtroom. Eric Dalton stood frozen near the counter, his face pale, sweat beading across his forehead as the whispers grew louder. Grace Caldwell faced him squarely, her tone sharp yet controlled. "Tell me, Mr. Dalton," she said, her voice carrying over the silence. "What kind of establishment teaches its staff to humiliate a veteran? To fire a woman for showing kindness?" Eric tried to muster a smile, but it came out as a nervous twitch. Miss Caldwell, this was all a misunderstanding. The young woman was disruptive. I was protecting your father's dignity. Protecting his dignity? Grace's eyes hardened. By yelling at him? By calling him names? By mocking the woman who tried to help him? The crowd stirred. Reporters leaned forward, recording every word. Amira stood quietly a few steps behind Grace. She did not look angry. She simply looked tired. The kind of tired that comes from holding one's ground when everyone else turns away. I didn't do anything special, she said softly, her voice trembling but steady enough to be heard. He was scared. Anyone with a heart could see that. I just did what was right. Did what was right. Her words struck deeper than any accusation. The guests who had once clapped for Eric now avoided her gaze. Henry sat in his chair beside Grace, eyes distant but alert. He blinked a few times, searching for the right words. Then slowly he reached for Amira's hand. You, he whispered, voice fragile but clear. You are the only one who saw me as human. The room stilled completely. Even the reporters stopped moving. The old man's words, quiet as they were, carried more weight than anything else spoken that day. Amira swallowed the lump in her throat. Anyone would have done the same. Henry shook his head faintly. No, not anyone. Grace rested a hand on her father's shoulder, then turned back to the cameras. This is not about money, she said. It's about values. My father built Caldwell Systems on the belief that technology should serve people, not replace compassion. Today, that belief was tested in the cruelest way. Her gaze swept across the room. But thanks to this woman, I know that belief still lives on. Reporters began snapping photos again, the light glinting off the chandelier above. The same chandelier under which Amira had been humiliated just one night before. Grace continued, her voice steady. From this moment forward, we will be filing formal charges against this establishment for discrimination and public misconduct. And as for Ms. Johnson, she turned toward Amira, smiling gently. My father and I owe you more than words. You will receive full compensation for the injustice you faced, and we would like you to join the Caldwell Foundation. We help veterans living with Alzheimer's, and we could use someone with your heart. The crowd broke into soft applause. Eric stepped forward desperately, his voice shaking. Miss Caldwell, please. This will destroy me. It was one mistake. I was only doing my job. Grace looked at him for a long moment. Your job was to lead with integrity. You failed. Eric's shoulders slumped, the fight gone from his eyes. He looked around at the guests who once admired him. None of them met his gaze. Amira stood silently beneath the chandelier, light spilling across her face. The same crystal sparkles that had watched her humiliation now reflected something different. Quiet redemption. No victory dance. No revenge speech. Just truth standing tall. Henry looked up at her once more, his lips curving into a faint, peaceful smile. God sends angels, he murmured. Not when we ask for them, but when we forget we still need them. And as the cameras clicked one last time, Amira felt the moment settle in her heart. Not as triumph, but as peace. She had not shouted. She had not fought. She had simply held her ground. And the world had finally noticed. Part 6. Resolution and Transformation. 500-600 words. Purpose. Show healing, change, and poetic justice. Weeks later, news headlines. Waitress wins discrimination case against elite restaurant. With Tyrone's help, Amira wins the lawsuit, receiving settlement money and public apology. She uses it not for luxury, but to start the Caldwell Memory Foundation, a center for veterans and Alzheimer's patients. Grace partners with her, funding the project in honor of her father. Henry visits occasionally, smiling warmly whenever he sees her. Their friendship becomes a symbol of compassion and justice. Eric loses his job, reputation, and career. The price of cruelty. The city remembers Amira not as a waitress, but as a woman who changed a billionaire's life through kindness. The garden outside the Caldwell Memory Foundation glows in the soft light of sunset. The sound of laughter drifts through the air. Veterans playing chess, patients painting, volunteers chatting quietly. On a wooden bench near a blooming magnolia tree, Henry Caldwell sits with his cane resting beside him. His eyes, though aged and a little lost, shine with a familiar warmth as Amira approaches carrying 2 cups of tea. She sets one beside him. 2 sugars, no lemon, right? She teases gently. Henry chuckles, a fragile sound but full of peace. You remember that? Some things, she smiles, are worth remembering. For a moment they sit in silence, watching the sunlight fall across the engraved plaque that reads, The Caldwell Memory Foundation. In memory of those the world forgets. Henry's gaze lingers there. He turns to her slowly and says, voice trembling yet steady, Sometimes, God sends angels disguised as waitresses. Amira's eyes glisten. She laughs softly through her tears. And sometimes, she replies, he sends billionaires who still have hearts. Henry smiles, the kind that says he finally understands. He reaches for her hand, frail fingers gripping hers with quiet strength. Around them, the camera drifts, capturing the world they built from pain, humility, and hope. Across the courtyard, a young volunteer helps an elderly man with a paintbrush. Grace is there too, talking with families, no longer the woman behind a corporation, but a daughter who chose to make things right. As the wind stirs the flowers and sunlight fades, Amira looks up toward the sky. Her voice, soft yet powerful, carries the story's final truth. When the world turned away, she reached out, and that changed everything.